Greetings, brothers and sisters. So this is going to be a little bit different. Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies.
They're dropping like flies.
Listen, people are dropping like flies out there.
I am
Boop.
stop.
We're dropping like flies around here.
We're dropping like flies here.
Jeez, sir, 2 more just went down. Dropping like flies.
Too many people around here been dropping like flies already, and where's that getting us, huh? Nowhere. Fast.
Biden's being Biden's being an extremist.
Crush that fly.
I'm not going to be reporting on deaths today. I have three things I want to cover more in depth. So let's start here. This isn't one of them, but let's just watch this. Dust Devil disrupts a Florida baseball game. Little League.
I've never seen anything like that in my whole entire life, on and off the field.
As an umpire and a baseball player, Aiden Wiles sees plenty of breaking balls with plenty of spin, but the air
So, let's watch it again here.
around the ball spinning, now that's a new one.
I was looking at the pitch, and then I looked to my right and see this dust storm.
Wiles says the rock scratched up his chest and his stomach as he tried to get out of the way, but he wound up running right back in when he saw the catcher needed help.
And at first, I was freaked out myself until I saw him, like, trapped in.
So that happened. I experienced a derecho, whatever it is. It's like 100-mile-an-hour wind that comes out of nowhere. And 3 of my family members were outside when it hit. 2 of them were intense, and I was the other one. And it just came, it was this really powerful wind. My son was, setting up a tent. He wanted to camp outside. It was a weird situation. And he was holding up the tent's wall, with his hands as the wind blew. And it was just, it hit, and there was about 20 seconds of 100-mile-an-hour wind, and then it was gone. Expect more of these weird weather events as we move forward. Forget a sex drought. The real reason the birth rate is dropping is much more mundane. Not many people are having 10 children, but Elon Musk does. If people don't have more children, not many people have 10 children, but Elon Musk does. If more people don't have more children, civilization is going to crumble, he declared. Low birth rate. But then they're saying, oh my God, I forgot to have children generation, selfish women who have been stripped of hope by destructive left-wing ideology, or they, in fact, making decisions based much more on mundane stuff like not being able to afford a home or the huge cost of childcare. Low birth rates and failing fertility is a worldwide phenomenon. In Europe, France had the highest birth rate. The southern European countries like Italy, Portugal, and Spain, the lowest. South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and Hong Kong are all very worried about population decline. This is just happening all over the place. I'm trying to get to their bogus reason here. I don't know. Do I really have to fight it? We know what's happening, right? And it's just going to get worse. There's going to be, I don't know if it's worse, less people. Is it worse? It's just going to get better in terms of less people, right? Less people is going to make the world a better place. So I want to get to this, see the way that I see. Okay, so I saw this on Shark Tank last night. And I'm going to talk about its implications in terms of future generations. It's really hard for us to understand what's going on with the kids. What's up with the youth? As the great Corey J. Feldman once said. And more so than any other previous generation. Like, our parents didn't understand us. And, you can go back successive generations in America. But before that, people understood each other because nothing was changing. In the Aboriginal cultures, the village-based cultures. But with the onset of technology, life has changed so drastically that the kids today are almost like a different species. So let's get into it here.
Next up is a company with a mission to normalize mental health struggles.
a company to normalize mental health struggles. Now, I don't think this is an Illuminati eye. This is a young girl. I believe her story, either she's a great actress or whatever. But what she has done here, she's like 24 or something like this. She's an artist who's created a line of merch and has been very successful. And so what she's done is she has like something on the front of the shirt, the sweatshirt or t-shirt or whatever it is, that says I experience anxiety, or just the word anxiety or whatever it might be. And then on the sleeves she has affirmations like remember to breathe or this too shall pass. And she's designed these clothes, and her sales are quite significant without paying any money in advertising, which is a big thing for the Shark Tank, right? She does these drops, like there's people who do drops, and they have a limited amount of product, and everybody rushes to buy them. And so she had something like $400K in the bank and no debt, all these things that sharks love. But they said that she didn't really even need a shark, so she ended up not getting a deal because she's already become very successful, doing my best, right, with some things. And, nothing that certainly any of us would buy. Speak it into existence with an eye here in the rainbow. All this kind of symbology and things that, are very there for the youth and the woke culture. She has a YouTube channel here. And this is her, website or whatever it is. So I want to talk about this in terms of what this means about mental health and with the youth today. The youth is high. There's a much higher rate of suicide and depression and hopelessness and so much more because their future is bleak. Because if things continue the way they are now, they'll have no lives, right? I mean, you won't even have a physical in the world life. More and more screen time, more and more, whatever it is. I mean, technology, AI stuff, it's just going to go in that direction, right? It's going to go in a direction where you're going to have less and less human, natural world stuff, and until humanity would disappear that way. Or the civilization is going to collapse because of, this and so many other things. And so these kids aren't getting anything like a normal life. And I've seen it devolving and getting worse. And to the extent there's almost no way to communicate with youthful people, young people. There's no shared experience. Their experience with family, their experience with reality is different than ours. That's why I always say that the battle's already lost, because you think that you're waking people up. You think that you're realizing what's going on. It doesn't matter whether we see what's going on or not. It's a matter if the young people do, and they don't. They're buying into it, right? They're ratting out their parents, their truther parents. They're, why don't you guys, just see the beauty of the woke consciousness, this new movement that's going on, right? They've bought into the gender thing. They've bought into all these, aspects of feminists, all the stuff that's going on. They believe it. That's their reality, right? All the things that we can so easily see through, they're completely indoctrinated in. That's their life. And they have no real choice in it because all their friends and everyone else is there doing the same thing. That's what they believe. And there's such a gap, a generation gap, that it could never be bridged, right? And so, I don't have a problem with this girl and what she's doing, and, even the T-shirts themselves or whatever it might be. And, like I said, I don't think it's intentional Illuminati symbolism. I don't know. I don't care. That's not the point. But it started off with in Shark Tank where they're saying normalizing mental health situations. And what she is doing, and so many people, this movement, this goes back to the stuff that happened in that one event, the school event, and the kid wrote on a blackboard before he left this world. This is the official story. Emotional healing, love, something like it's like a 5-year-old kid wrote on the chalkboard, nurturing, healing love, I think it was. And then a senator got involved and passed, Lady Gaga got involved at Yale, and, they were trying to get emotional healing into schools. And, it's been around for a while. And what it is they want to get into your child's internal world and the future, and now and in the future. And what they're doing is making a dysfunctional system that's making people crazier and crazier each generation. And I include the Wi-Fi in this. I've talked about that so much. The electromagnetic frequency poisoning, the EMFs and things. That's a big part of it. But it's more than just that. It's, going into the cyber world, all of these things, right? And so, there's that aspect of it. Then there's just the culture itself and the hedonism and, not having real relationships to break down the family. And everything in our system is becoming more and more unnatural. Every aspect of our system, even if you go out to a park or something like this, it's become, there's technology in those experiences. Like anything that's like owned by the mainstream or, a part of the government is now less natural than it used to be. Like even if it's something like the Grand Canyon or some, place you go camping, they've, for one, you're still getting Wi-Fi reception and these things and GPS and all that stuff. But aside from that, the whole experience is based in screens and, sharing it on social media, and you're camping, but, you gotta somehow take video and post it on Instagram and pictures and things. So like everything's become less natural, like still focused on, you're out there camping thinking about how you can post on social media and get thumbs up for having a real world experience. So every aspect of life is now been infiltrated by technology and these things. But this original statement on Shark Tank, normalizing mental health issues, I've said this so much, it is, it's the systemic issue. They never blame the system. It's always the individual. You're messed up. This is a great system, and you're the one having psychological issues. But they didn't exist before. Like all the stuff in the DSM-5, almost none of it existed. 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago, people very seldomly exhibited anything that resembles these psychological issues, right? And if it was a small fragment of the population. If you take wild animals that are, in the job of being that animal and surviving, they're in survival mode. They have a programmed life that's based in natural living and adaptation, right? And if you take those animals and you put them in a zoo, they all exhibit psychological deviant behaviors, right? So, for example, there's a behavior here. Repetitive pacing behavior is exhibited by many species of the zoos and is particularly prevalent in carnivores with large home ranges such as bears. Pacing can be behavioral indicator of poor welfare. And however, understanding this behavior here is another way of saying it here. If you've ever been to a zoo and seen polar bears swimming in circles compulsively for hours, or seen tigers pacing back and forth endlessly, or of elephants swaying back and forth rhythmically, all blank look in their eyes, you witness animal suffering from zoochosis. There's another term which I can't find here, but whatever it is, right? That's a new term, whatever you call it, you see it in the animals because they're not being what they're designed to be, and they're stuck in a cage. You see this certainly in prisons with people, but then all of our life is unnatural, and it affects us because we're not doing what we're designed to be. We're not in contact with our souls and our spiritual reason for being here. We've disconnected from God. Religions have helped with that. So people go, well, yeah, you can do religion. Yeah, but religions are a middleman between you and God. They're the primary offenders. The family is broken down, and that's our social unit, like I always say. Fish live in schools. Cows live in herds. Lions live in prides. People live in families, and the family unit has been destroyed. So we don't have that. Like we don't, try to create families, maybe now on the internet, whatever kids are doing, but the family unit has been destroyed. All these things. And so instead of blaming the system, they blame the individual. That's everything about our psychological movement. And now the big push is it's okay to be broken. It's okay to be messed up. We all are. Like, this is what the youth is saying. This is why this business is taking off. All these, young people who have been told it's okay to be crazy. And it is, because the system, for the system, it's going to make you crazy, so it has to be normalized. It's, it's part of the beast. Right? And that's, like a sad state of affairs. Like, it's normal to be crazy because the beast needs you to accept what's been done to you, right? And then, with this idea of a systemic collapse, and you have all these weak people who have been damaged by the system and don't know anything else, and then thrust into the reality of having to survive like natural people will in a post-apocalyptic world that isn't as abundant. And you have kind of a recipe for like some sort of horror movie, some post-apocalyptic horror movie, apocalyptic horror movie that we're all, especially the young people are going to have to suffer through. The ones who survive the initial aspect of it, but then they're going to have to come back, some of them, who will be let back in because of the reduced population in a world that's, completely, it's the inevitable disaster movie that this system ends up being, right? And so, this is just an example of that. Like, this is a successful business this young woman is running because the young people have accepted that they're broken and they're just thinking it's normal. And, that's a sad state of affairs. So the next thing I want to cover here a little bit more in depth is two subjects to do with basketball, but how they apply to Hollywood celebrities dropping like flies in the apocalypse. Morant finally addresses second gun video and suspension. The Memphis Grizzlies star spoke up after shown holding a firearm on social media. And so this is what he had to say here. I know I've disappointed a lot of people who have supported me. This is a journey, and I recognize there's more work to do. My words may not mean much right now, but I take full accountability for my actions. I'm committed to continuing to work on myself. He did not write this, right? This is not his words. He sat down and they crafted a statement with his team, his lawyers, whatever it was, right? But this is not his words. And so this is a big story here. Adam Silver, the commissioner, is shocked. They're talking about suspending him for half a year, or maybe even a whole season. And so I'll get into that in a moment. The second thing here is Victor Wembanyama. This is him as a young kid wearing a San Antonio Spurs shirt. This guy's a 7'4" basketball prospect from France who's supposed to be the greatest basketball player that ever lived in the future because of his skill set as such a big person, tall person. And a lot of teams were playing badly and losing intentionally to get a shot at landing him in the NBA draft through the corrupt draft lottery. So he went to the San Antonio Spurs. There's Morant there. There's Tony Parker's, a former NBA player. Yes, he's going to the San Antonio Spurs. So proud of you. He's the guy that posted the picture. For some reason, they thought this was sensitive content. He's wearing a Tony Parker jersey, and Tony Parker was his idol because Tony Parker was originally from France. They had two players that came from France that played for San Antonio, Boris Diaw and Tony Parker, and the French, people considers the Spurs their team, right? He said he knew the Spurs were going to win the lottery. And I'm going to explain this too after I get into the There's a special relationship between France and the Spurs because of Tony Parker and, of course, also Boris Diaw. I know half the country, if not the whole country, wanted the Spurs to have the first pick. So I was looking at everyone, and everyone was happy, so I was too. Not to brag about it, but I knew I was going to happen. And I actually recorded myself saying this in the morning walking to practice. So yeah, the universe told me dreams, feelings, it happens sometimes, but it's never wrong, it's always right. So he knew ahead of time the Spurs were going to win the lottery. And it's because, like with all lotteries, it's rigged, you know. And I'm going to talk about that first and then get back to the Ja Morant thing. Because, you know, when you tamper with the competitive outcome of things, we live in a competitive society where competition is something, you know, in terms of, it's a race of like survival of the fittest, right? There's some natural element to that. It's how the way that in the natural world, animals will, you know, fight for the ability to own land, you know, have territory, and also to reproduce, right? There's a competition to keep the system strong. You know, going back to this mental health thing where weakness and brokenness is being celebrated. And so when you tamper with the outcome of competition and people realize the system's rigged, then they stop competing. They stop trying. And it's happened because people are liars and cheaters. So with the NBA as an example of this, they used to have it like all other professional sports where the team that had the worst record would get the first pick in the upcoming draft and be able to get the best player, at least the perceived best player, coming out of college or whatever it was, right? It makes sense. Your team came in last. You're the worst team, so you should get first pick. The problem is teams would then tank. Teams would lose purposefully because, you know, they wanted to get the first pick. And this happened very recently where a coach came out and said he was offered $100,000 for every loss that his team would incur, and it goes against the competitive spirit. But it happens because it's just business, and it makes sense to try to improve your franchise when you have a crappy, you know, if you're close to the bottom and you're not going to make the playoffs, and then you might as well be the worst team because then you get the first pick. And so what the NBA did was tamper with this by creating a lottery where all the teams that were, you know, involved in not making the playoffs would have some chance of getting the number one pick. So there were 4 teams that had a 14% chance of winning the lottery, and San Antonio was one of them. Then there was 7 more teams that had lesser odds, that had, you know, 10%, 5%, 3%, whatever. And so those were, there was like, I think 14 teams, I'm not sure, doesn't matter, that had a chance of winning this lottery, this pick, this number one pick, this transformational pick. You know, when people think about rigging an election and rigging the NBA and rigging the NFL, they think every game is, you know, orchestrated and scripted. There's a lot of stupidity out there. You know, people just don't, you know, it's just, you know, it's binary thinking. Either it's fair or it's completely scripted. You know, there's the WWE, the, you know, the professional wrestling, which is performance-based, right? It's a, you know, it's a script-based, you know, choreographed wrestling match, right? With talking points and speeches and all these things. It's all completely, you know, a show. Whereas professional sports, they play a game. You see the game, you see the, you know, the physicality, you see the effort, and the game's outcome is pretty much never manipulated in an outright way, where it's, you know, where there's a script. What they can do is, for one, they give certain franchises the advantage by, you know, finances, by, you know, there's some franchises that have more money than others, and there's that, right? They can spend more money. The New York Yankees, the Dallas Cowboys, right? These big franchises that are in big cities, New York, Chicago, Boston, whatever it is, LA, all these cities that have a lot of money, a lot of following, a lot of, advertisement, a lot of brand recognition. And so they have an advantage just then. And then there's things that rig it, trades, and now the lottery and these things that rig the outcomes of these, sporting events. You have a superior team with better coaches, better athletes, and so you have an overwhelming advantage. And the system is rigged that way, but they want some parity as well. So there's all of that, right? They're trying to create parity, but also create a way to make sure the marquee players, the marquee cities, like they want Boston and LA to play in the NBA championship. When I was a kid, the Celtics with Larry Bird playing the Lakers with Magic Johnson was the biggest ratings that they ever got. And so when Michael Jordan was in the finals, the biggest ratings, right? And so they wanted to rig the system so Michael Jordan ended up in the championship. It was good for the business, the show, it's entertainment business. But they still play a game. Games are played, but they can manipulate the outcome by the way the officials, they can change the rules, the way the officials interpret those rules. And then there's so many different ways that they can affect the outcome, just like in elections, just like in anything else. They can rig it, and money being the central way of rigging something, the more money you have, the better your chances of winning. The more money you spend, the more talent you can gather. And so in terms of the lottery, it's been well known by people that it's been rigged in the past. Once for San Antonio. When San Antonio Spurs, the city of San Antonio was voting on whether to get a new stadium, to build a new place for them to play. Again, small market team. There's nothing else in San Antonio. They don't have baseball. They don't have football. They have a basketball team. Beautiful city. I went there once. Spiritual gathering. Master Chargy, the third master of the system, came to Texas. And I went there at a riverfront mall. Beautiful place, right? At least what I saw. Nice city. But they were voting, the citizens were voting to whether build another, athletic complex for the team. And it just so happened they won the number one pick that year, which turned out to be Tim Duncan. And they won multiple championships because of him. They got this guy, Tony Parker from France, had a relationship. Now there's an international aspect to the NBA. They want to cultivate international following. They've had players. They have a player now from Japan who's playing for the Lakers, who has Japanese ancestry. There was Yao Ming, who was a Chinese. They have all these international players, European players like Luka Doncic, and he comes from Slovenia, right? And here's a tie-in because the team he plays for is owned by Mark Cuban from Shark Tank, which I talked about earlier. And they, if they got the 11th pick or later, 11 through 29 or whatever amount of teams they are, the pick was going to go to the New York Knicks. They had a protected pick if it was the 10th pick or earlier. Dallas would retain that pick, right? So they had to be really bad or just be, good and not worry and lose the pick. And they turned out to be not so good. They traded for Kyrie Irving at the end of the year, and they were, about to miss the playoffs. And so they decided to tank. They rested Kyrie Irving for the rest of the year, and they're going to rest Luka, but they had Slovenian Day because there was another player from Slovenia that was coming, I believe, who played for the Chicago Bulls. It was like the last game of the season. And so they played Luka in one quarter. Like all these Slovenian people and families were supposed to be there. And they were trying to rest Luka because they were trying to sabotage their chance at winning, which they got fined for $750,000 or something like that, right? Maybe more, I don't know. Well, it doesn't matter. Because they got away with it because they ended up getting the 10th pick. And so they're going to retain that draft pick, which is good because they need help in their roster. But this is the way that cheating is done, right? And they have this international flavor now, and they want to, increase that. So this player who Already has a strong following in Europe. He played in European leagues and particularly in France. Now has the association with the Spurs, which is the favorite team in France because of the French players that played there. And so, now there's this, right? And, how can you say it's not rigged? There's financial benefits international benefits to expand this brand, and they'll probably play some games. Spurs will play a game in France like they're playing professional football in England for years now, and, in China and some of these countries. I bet they play an NBA game in France at some point. The Spurs, once a year, that'll be their team, and they'll have all these people buying their jerseys, and, it'll become a thing, right, because of this player. And so how would you say this is a coincidence, right? They stage and rig everything, and they cheat. So when there's cheating on this level, manipulating people, pretending that this is something that's not, doing this on a performance-based, business-based model where competition is secondary to the bottom line in the business. And so when Ja Morant flashes a gun on Instagram, and I'm not, condoning his behavior, and he's a young 23-year-old kid, and we all did stuff that's stupid, and he's probably drunk. And he flashes it again, and now he's looking at suspending him for half the year, destroying his ability to make the kind of superstar money he was due to make based on his play on the court. I don't like the guy. He always has a sneer on his face, and he comes from a two-parent family that had money. He went to a private school. I mean, he was, not a gang kid, right? He grew up in South Carolina, not some, gang-ridden city in L.A. or something like that, right? And he's embraced this, whatever he's doing with the guns, and, the incidences he's had were all, problematic, right? They involve threatening violence, thuggery, some of these things. But America is the number one thug, right? We're the number one. Well, first of all, the, FBI condemned NWA, these gangster rappers, and it promoted the crap out of it. And then the music industry and everything else promoted gangster rap, particularly targeting black youth, inner city youth, with gun violence. And guns were celebrated in the rap community, right? This is what, he's doing. This is the stuff that Ja Morant's doing. It's a systemic thing. It's been done by the system to promote this and push it, right? But then they're like, oh, no, we're against violence and guns. Well, we're the number one, military this, and all of these sporting leagues, right? All these leagues have a relationship with the military and the military-industrial complex. They have flyovers at football games. They celebrate the veterans, and it's just even the San Antonio Spurs. They drafted David Robinson, another number one pick, 10 years before Tim Duncan, and he played for Navy, right? He went to Naval Academy. He was 6'6" when he went in. You couldn't be taller than 6'6" and be in the Navy. They don't want big people there because of the tight spaces on ships and submarines and things. And he grew to 7 feet while he was in the Navy. And so, his career was cut short because he had to do his, he went to the Naval Academy, but he had to do extra time there, right, because of the rules, even though he was too tall for the Navy. It was a whole thing. But, there's a relationship between professional sports and the military industrial complex, and we spend over 60% of our budget on weapons, and yet they're going to suspend this guy for waving a gun, right? And again, he's punky and he's stupid. Like, there's no explanation, no reasonable explanation, whether this is staged or something, sure, but there's no reasonable explanation for why he's doing what he's doing. Why he, we did this stuff, but he did do it, and it was stupid, but it's totally hypocritical for a rigged system like basketball is, sports is, an entertainment industry. And it promotes military and the military industrial complex in a society that's pushed guns on, in these violent movies and all these violent video games, and specifically for different communities and demographics in terms of gangster rap and things like this. and then to, take it out on one guy, right? It's just the hypocrisy here. It's off the charts. Okay, so I want to add one more thing here. LeBron James grew up in Akron, Ohio, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, who weren't the worst team, won the first pick that year. And, there's just a number of things like this. I can't remember all of them. But it shows you that, when you're a corrupt and rigged system, then it's hard to discipline certain people, like George Santos or whatever, but not discipline Hunter Biden or even Donald Trump or Joe Biden, right? Like there's some people get to break the rules and some don't, all these things. I want to get to this Elon Musk thing, but it's clear here, the corruption is so bad and the system is so effed, and that they're, selective outrage, right? And that's, a broken system with broken people who do broken things, and then the system is never to blame. And they throw individuals under the bus when they, this is, I guess I got this Jussie Smollett thing going here. Remember these two guys came in and told that story. That was hilarious. Another example of this. But let's go to Elon Musk here. So I saw this, I think, on Facebook this morning. I don't know where it was, but pretty sure it's Facebook. Somebody's posted these pictures that I think are doctored of Elon Musk being, romantic with a robot he's creating. This is his real robot, which seems to be a faceless robot, with these other pictures and this other story, which I believe to be faked in one way or another, is being floated around the internet. Here it is here. Elon Musk's robot wife on final stages as passwords will be needed for sex. Because you don't want your robot cheating on you. We saw that in that TV show Humans. There's these stories, and I believe these all to be fake, right? I don't think this picture is real. And, it's like not going along in terms of the, here's one in Fortune. Elon Musk says that an AI humanoid robots will eventually outnumber people. It's not even clear what an economy means at that point, he said. He was talking about how his Teslas are semi-sentient robots, the cars themselves. So he's already sort of in the robot business. And again, he does have this robot called, his first humanoid robot called Optimus, that he talked about in 2022. Now he's come out against AI. So I'm not sure what's going on here. Like I said, the one story seems to be fake. This issue with AI and robots remains, right? Because robots are the ultimate replacement population, right? People talk about being replaced by one demographic, being replaced by another. But robots and AI are going to do more and more things better than human beings. They can be designed for a specific task and perform that task in ways that human employees, and even if they're not better, they just have to be almost as good, right? A robot or AI just has to be competent, and the advantages of having a robot or an AI in terms of the business makes so much sense, right? Because you own the robot, like it can work forever. You don't need breaks. They don't need vacations. They don't need maternity leave, right? Whatever it might be. That a robot is superior employee, just based in its very existence and nature. It's designed for a purpose, and it's not going to, at least the robot itself, the AI can, backtalk or whatever it might do in the future, but aspire to be something else. But, for people, as opposed to a machine versus people, the machine is a better employee. And so we already know that. Like the robots are coming because, people are not that good workers anymore, right? And when you have money, you grow up with some entitlement, you cease to be able to do the kind of jobs that robots will inevitably do, like clean bathrooms and janitorial work and, digging dishes, run machinery. Like imagine if your bulldozer and backhoe were fully automated or whatever, you no longer needed, construction workers, and, robots could fill all those types of manual labor jobs. But now we're seeing that the Writers Guild is freaked out that AI technology is going to take over their, writing on Hollywood and, the strike that's going on, which I've covered. And so this is the inevitable collapse of our civilization where, people become so lethargic and so unnaturally inept and are, imagine robots doing everything for you. And then people no longer having interpersonal relationships because they can program a robot to, be that for them, right? Be their spouse or marry robots. And, this is a whole big thing. And they don't, represent, it's the ultimate in narcissism, where a relationship with a real man or woman, a marriage, and that person has their own needs and their, all the things that causes divorce and things, where you would have a, some sort of a Stepford wife type of situation. And so, all these things are indicators of a system that's in free fall and collapse. All the things I've focused on today. Sports is huge, right? The mental health industry, and now, the robotic AI technology. It's all indications of a breakdown in the system because it's making people weaker. And, it's evident that people have gotten weaker and weaker with each succeeding generation, each following generation. And that's the most, the biggest testament of how demonic our system is. Because if people are being made weaker by your system, then the system is failing. If people are more entitled, more selfish, more psychologically impaired, every level, every check, physically not as strong, physically not as capable, right? Non-existing attention spans and all these other things. It's, an absolute mess across the board. People are a mess. And that, more than anything, should tell you this is why the system has to collapse. Because it's making people, worse. It's not pulling out what's best in us. Like I said, disconnecting us from the family, from our soul's purpose, and becoming more and more unnatural. It has consequences, and then people become self-destructive, more suicidal, more prone to, accidents and mistakes and screw-ups and, all these other things. This is what we're seeing. It's because the system is creating or influencing people in the wrong direction. And therefore, the system, which isn't aligned with the divine purpose or divine powers, has to collapse. And it is. And, thank God. But where does that leave the rest of us, which I always talk about? Because you have weaker people who don't have a clue to how to survive without the system. And therein lies the immediate problem. Eventually that problem will be, secondary to other things that are going on. But for people having to face a life without this system in a post-apocalyptic world, right? And, a much harder living conditions is, our immediate problem. And that's what I talk about quite frequently here. But the evidence is overwhelming. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely pointing for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.